Welcome everybody. My name is Tim Saney and I'm a VMware Systems Engineer. In this month's Sales 101 Enablement session, I'm going to cover the basic overview of what DevOps is and how VMware can help streamline the associated processes. We'll also address the pain points with application development, starting from the initial coding stage and all the way through releasing it into the production environment. So let's get started. So first off, you're probably asking, what is DevOps? DevOps can be described as an integration of developers and operational IT teams in order to improve the collaboration and the productivity by automating infrastructure and automating workflows and continuously measuring application performance. So that's kind of like just a real quick definition of what it is. Again, it's just a melding of the DevOps teams as well as operational IT teams getting together to come up with a unified structure and how they're going to do things. And by working together, everything just tends to flow a lot better. So let's compare between what the development and operations teams want, essentially. The development team typically wants to release small code changes frequently whenever they want to and need to do that. And they want to be able to do it without having to bother with the operational team. The operations team wants to have a stable environment with very infrequent changes to reduce the risk, as well as have formal handover processes as far as when the development team hands over a new application going into production. And they want to be able to hand that off so that they have everything that they need to know about it, because they're essentially, once it goes off into production, it's up and running, they're responsible for that application from then on out. So as you can see, the two teams essentially are wanting kind of the opposite things from what the other one wants. And obviously this can cause some issues. But what if I could tell you that we can appeal to both of those sides, giving them what they want? Well, that's kind of the nature of what DevOps is. But before we go into more detail on how to accomplish that, let's take a closer look at the kind of old and new philosophies surrounding the DevOps models first, so you can kind of fully understand the differences and better understand what I'm talking about. With the older, or kind of the traditional DevOps model, developers typically created these large chunks of code for new applications that took quite a while to be able to create them. They then had to perform manual processes such as testing the code themselves. Then there was a phase of application lifecycle that is doing user acceptance testing, basically where you have a subset of users that are going to test out the application. Essentially, you're going to use them to try to find the bugs, and also you're going to make sure that the application is actually doing what those users need it to do. So making sure that the developers have interpreted the need of what the application has to do. Then they're going to stage the application, and then they're going to do load testing on it. Now, once it's ready to be released into the production environment, which is where the waiting game typically would start. So the developers will be ready to push it to the production network, and this is where the operational team kicks in. But then they end up waiting for the storage admins to create the appropriate storage and LUNs for the new application and associated servers. Then they wait for the virtual admins to create the virtual machines with the OS and the application, configure them. Then don't forget, you also have to wait for the network admins to configure the networking portion to make sure that the connectivity is correct so that everything can communicate properly on the network and where it's not supposed to. Once everything has been provisioned and configured and is live on the production network, then the application typically tends to have issues. And the reason for this is because the development environment where they built this application and the production environment tend to be not exactly the same. Because just behind the cost behind it and the maintenance, the amount of work that it takes, basically you'd have to have two identical entire networks, which is not feasible for most companies, right? Because of the cost and the work. So there's typically differences between them. And now the dev and the ops teams are having to spend the time to troubleshoot why this new application that worked in the user acceptance testing as well as the developer testing in their environment, but it's not working in production. So again, that takes time and effort. So here you can see why this traditional DevOps model doesn't really always work well. There's a lot of issues with it. So there's a lot of inefficiencies with code versions and updates that are hard to track and manage throughout the entire application lifecycle process. The lack of consistency and uniformity between the development and the production environments, again, cause those applications to not run properly once they're put into the production environment. And again, this increases the time frame to deploy the application to get it running. So this entire application creation and release process is very slow and inefficient under this model. And finally, when you combine all of these, this causes the company not be able to respond to their business needs quickly, and is going to potentially make their competitors look better or be able to beat them to the punch and get things out into the market quicker. So let's take a look at what we call the new cooperative DevOps model. And again, this makes sense, especially for the very fluid IT environments that we're working today. Things are changing very quickly. The business is changing quickly, and everybody has to respond to the business need quickly, which means IT needs to respond to those business needs very quickly as well. So most developers now have changed their philosophy on developing applications. Instead of doing those very large chunks of code and then going through and testing that large chunk, now what they're doing is they're doing little chunks of code at a time. And this type of development is called agile development. So as the name implies, they release and update small chunks of code very frequently, hence the name agile, because they're staying very agile, very, very frequent releases and small, which makes it manageable. With the development and operations teams working together, they're going to build templates for their associated servers and their applications, network settings, storage, and everything. They're going to build these templates, and they're going to build them so that they're all very uniform. Then they provide the developers with the ability to go into a portal and deploy these standard templates in an automatic fashion without needing to go back to request them from the operations team and waiting a very lengthy time frame for them to set up the VMs, to do the networking, to do the storage and all that. They're going to have these pre-configured templates that have all that configured already. The developers have the permissions to go into the portal, say, okay, I need a 3-tier web app with these VMs, with this networking, and they can go and deploy it right from there. The process can now take literally hours instead of waiting weeks or even potentially months like that old model did, waiting for everybody to provision and do their part to get that ready to go into production. So you can see this is much more efficient. So the overall benefits of this new cooperative DevOps model is, code is written and released much faster. It also has fewer issues. The code can be, if there is an issue, it can be very quickly troubleshot and modified and then re-released again. You save time provisioning the application and all the associated VMs to production, again, from weeks to months to only down to hours or days at best. These standardized blueprints, again, ensure that there's little to no issues once the application is running in the production environment, and you know that every time and every release of the code that they do, that, again, it's all the same settings and same versions of software and everything else. The application time to market obviously is greatly increased while reducing both the team's workloads, increasing their productivity, which allows them to basically accomplish other tasks. So, and finally, the company can again respond to business needs much quicker than ever before. And as the business needs change, IT can change with it along with developers, and they can stay ahead of their competition, and that allows them to be able to release applications quicker, beating their competitors to the punch. So now that I've covered what DevOps is and what the basics of the old and new DevOps models are, let's talk about the tools that are needed to efficiently develop applications for that modern IT and that, again, that new DevOps model. We previously talked about many of the steps associated to application development. This slide kind of gives you a nice general overview of the entire application development lifecycle. The developers start off creating those small chunks of code using agile development methods that I mentioned earlier. Then they release the code and test it to ensure it functions properly. If it functions properly, then they do the user acceptance testing with a subset of users to ensure that it's doing what those users require and to, again, potentially find any bugs that they may have missed in the developer testing. It then gets staged and load tested to ensure that it performs appropriately under considerable load as it would be with the production environment. Because again, just the testing that they're doing, it's not like they have hundreds of people or thousands of people accessing that particular new application and testing it. So they need to make sure that the application is going to perform appropriately to the number of users that it will have to work with on the production. So they need to kind of do a test to kind of get an idea of how it's going to perform. If all goes well, is then ready to be released into the production environment. As you see here, the old ways were very manual throughout the application lifecycle, which again is very time consuming and again very prone for errors, a lot of human errors because of the manual processes. So with the new model, we need solutions to automate these processes while keeping them standardized. So let's now talk about what VMware can do to help customers automate the application development lifecycle from beginning to end. VMware is very uniquely positioned to help companies meet the needs to efficiently manage their entire application development lifecycle. With VMware's VRealize code stream, it provides an end-to-end solution that helps manage the entire application lifecycle process. VRealize Automation provides the developers a portal where they can quickly and easily deploy the required VMs and associated services when I was talking about those blueprints. NSX is our network virtualization solution, and it's a solution that is also now integrating with VRealize Automation and those blueprints to assist in automating the deployment of those network services. So when they're not only deploying those VMs, they're also deploying the associated network services along with them. So again, that helps limit networking teams from having to go back later and do additional configurations manually. Then we have VRealize Orchestrator. This can also be tied in with VRealize Automation to run various automated workflows from within the VRealize Automation blueprint. So Orchestrator has a lot of workflows that interact with many different VMware products, and it automates a lot of those different types of workflows to where you can customize and do just about anything. So when you start tying that in with VRealize Automation, VRealize Code Stream, again, you're automating many of these processes that were traditionally manual processes. So now let's take a little more deeper look into a few of these products and the primary ones that we talked about here. We're not going to cover them all, but let's just talk about a few of the key ones. So VRealize Code Stream is targeted at organizations that have a continuous delivery or DevOps initiatives. It's an application release automation and continuous delivery solution that allows developers and operations teams to release software more frequently and efficiently, all the while leveraging their investments in existing build, test, provisioning, deployment, and monitoring tools. With VRealize Code Stream, you can create a services model of a multi-tier application only involving one or few architects, which streamlines the entire process. As a result, we often see acceleration of application deployments in the order of 80 to 95%. So that's a huge improvement because of all of that automation that takes place. No more manual processes. CodeStream has three core functional modules, as you see here. The first is the pipeline automation, which helps add order to the release process. And it does it by automating the different tasks needed to provision, deploy, test, monitor, and decommission the software targeted for a specific release by leveraging those existing tools and processes. It also assures standardized configurations by coordinating the workflow across each release delivery stage. Finally, it provides the governance and control across the end-to-end process, ensuring consistency at each phase in the delivery pipeline. The second is artifact management, which provides the capability to support the modeling and resolution of artifacts so that the right artifact versions are automatically retrieved when deploying a particular build version of an application. This means that the organization can easily control and store and manage binary artifacts throughout the software release cycle and ensure that the right artifact versions are deployed every time and not the wrong ones. And the third is the release dashboard, which displays statuses to help identify problems so that they can be addressed quickly. You can look up the execution history of each pipeline and drill down to each of the execution details. You can also understand the relationships between the artifacts used in each of the executions. This unified view of the release status across various environments empowers collaboration between the teams to ensure higher quality and faster delivery of new software releases. So that's VRealize Code Stream. When using VRealize Automation, you can rapidly deploy application environments with standardized configurations across both private, hybrid, and public clouds. Today, deploying an application often involves a dozen different teams and often takes many weeks or even months to deploy an application. We talked about that earlier. All those manual steps, the different groups having to do their part, and all the waiting that happens. VRealize Automation provides policy-based governance, which will ensure that the services get delivered at the right service level, which includes delivering them at the right size to contain costs as well. In the case where a service has been idle or perhaps oversized, it is also possible to reclaim them. This leads to a CapEx savings of typically 20 to 30%, and often customers use those cost savings to justify the purchase of the product, even though the main driver is the agility provided by the products to the business because of all the automation. A new unified blueprint model and geographical design canvas consolidates how VRealize Automation's services are designed and configured. Again, that blueprint is where you can go and select what you want to deploy, what VMs, what particular network settings, storage, everything. And you create that blueprint, and then you give the permissions to developers to be able to deploy those. Again, not having to go through the operational team to do all that and then the waiting process associated to it. You can now export and import blueprints into standardized text-based representation. So essentially, they're treating blueprints as code. So again, developers are liking this because it's very easy to modify a blueprint because they can modify the code in it. Users can also take advantage, again, of all those NSX network constructs, such as virtual switches, routers, firewall, load balancing, which embeds these constructs directly into the infrastructure and application level blueprints they design. So again, making sure that everybody gets what they want in those blueprints and it's standardized. Dev's got what they need, and operations is making sure that it's standardized in the way it's supposed to be so that when it's released to production, there's no issues. So this eliminates the need for any networking to be provisioned and those separate activities outside of VRealize Automation. So that was VRealize Automation. Again, provides that self-service portal for the developers to go into. They can deploy their blueprints without having to necessarily go through operations and wait that long period of time. It's all automated and done much quicker. Then we have VRealize Orchestrator, which is a tool that provides numerous automated workflows that can be customized to use with most of the VMware products. Combining VRealize Automation and VRealize Orchestration workflows greatly increases the automation capabilities through the application lifecycle that we've been talking about. Purpose-built cloud management functionality that accelerates your time to value combined with general purpose automation capabilities that allow companies to adapt and extend our off-the-shelf cloud automation capabilities to meet their specific needs. Although there's a lot of tools that we can talk about that can integrate and make this whole application lifecycle easier, VRealize CodeStream, VRealize Automation, and Orchestrator, and NSX is the bulk of those tools that can greatly help you streamline that DevOps process and automate everything for you. So even though there are some other tools such as operations, looking at more from a troubleshooting and also monitoring standpoint, we have those other tools available. I'm just going to stick to covering those for the sake of time in our session. To finish up, I wanted to drive the point home that using this new DevOps model and associated tools and the way of thinking and doing these processes has been proven to help a lot of businesses. An effective DevOps model enables breakthrough business performance according to the survey results from the 2013 and 14 State of DevOps report. This report is based on answers from 9,200 and 4,000 survey responses respectively. The benefits of DevOps are clear and impressive. Higher performers are more agile, they're more reliable, and most of all, they win in the marketplace against their competition. So that completes this enablement session on DevOps. Hopefully you have a basic understanding now of what DevOps is in association with the application development lifecycle. You can see that VMware is uniquely positioned to help companies excel in being more efficient and reduce the time it takes to develop applications, making them more efficient in responding to the business needs as well as their competition, while driving their productivity up and their costs down. I look forward to joining me again in future sessions. Thank you and have a wonderful day.